actually our candidates that took time out of a busy campaign season to be here and speak to us. Is it 4 weeks from today? Is that?
But who's counting?
But who's counting? And I'm sure you all are really enjoying the campaign season. So my name is Sarah Grafstrom. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Community Relations with ARM, which is the trade association of providers like Mary T. That provide mainly residential services to people with disabilities around the state of Minnesota. I just want to, before we get started, let the candidates know of a couple ground rules. So ARM, as well as many of our co-hosts, are 501c3 nonprofits. We are nonpartisan, so we really want to make sure that folks are addressing the questions and not any personal attacks or each other. And so, I'm looking at you. So we'll just keep that in mind as we move through our forum. When we originally were talking to our candidates, we talked about maybe cutting it short, but we have a great group right now, so we'll kind of go through our questions. We sent you some questions ahead of time. And then we'll see if the audience has any questions for you. We'll alternate down the way as to who starts each question. And we're going to try and keep it to 2-minute answers, 1-minute introductions. That will let you start right now. Introduce yourself, what district you're running in, and we'll start with you, Senator Abler.
Well, thank you. I'm Jim Abler, and I'm very pleased to serve as a senator from Northwest Coon Rapids, and most of Andover. And so, if you live here, I'm sorry I don't get to represent you, so that's my loss. But it's a real privilege to serve, and some of the topics we handle include many things that you're worried about here, but we also worry about transportation, education, county ditches, and so many other topics. But caring about the people that have challenges is really, really important, and so making sure that you and other people who need special care are safe and are well cared for and have all the opportunities to be all you can be is high on my list, and I'm looking forward to the next forum.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, this is not an opening. We're not having a 1-minute opening, are we? No, it comes
you
later.
You don't need to take it, the whole minute.
My name is Roger Johnson. I live in Coon Rapids, and I hope to unseat my worthy opponent in the 4 weeks from today. That'd be the truth of it.
Yeah, it's pretty true.
And of course, we represent the same districts that you represent, which is the entire city of Ramsey and the entire city of Anoka, northwestern portion or northern slice of Coon Rapids, where I happen to live, and almost all of the city of Andover except one precinct, which is an adjoining Senate district. I'm glad to be here. I hope we get a chance to discuss the issues that brought you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Abigail Whalen. I represent Anoka and Ramsey in the Minnesota House. And I actually got to be here in 2014 for the same forum. It was just a great experience and an opportunity to come and talk about some of the issues that are important to all of us. And I'll just keep it really brief. I was raised in Anoka. I currently live in Ramsey. Love public policy, went to school for political science and public policy. And I also just love this community, even though, as Senator Abler mentioned, if you live here, I don't technically represent you, but as a state representative, all of the issues that matter to our communities are intertwined. And so I'd love to talk to you more about the issues facing the most vulnerable in our society. Hubert H. Humphrey actually has a great quote that I shared actually in 2014, and I just think it encompasses why we are here and why we need to make this a priority. But he said the moral test of a government is how we treat those that are in the dawn of life, children, the twilight of life, the elderly, and in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, the disabled. And that needs to be a priority for Minnesota. So I look forward to the conversation that we're going to have tonight.
Thank you.
I'm Andy Hilbrick. I'm obviously in the same area as I'm running for the position that Abigail has right now, which is covering Ramsey, or almost all of Ramsey and Anoka. I've lived in Ramsey my entire life, was raised there. And I actually do farming and tax preparation, so I've got a different background than she does.
Hi, I'm Representative Peggy Scott, and I represent almost all of Andover, northern Coon Rapids, and one precinct in Ramsey. And lived in Andover for 20 years, been married to the same man for 32, and raised our 2 kids in this area, and just really enjoy the friendly people in the northern suburbs up here. And I look forward to tonight I have never sat on the Health and Human Services Committee, but I have a great respect for life at all levels. I have a great respect for people that are called to work in this community, and we want to support you in any way that we can. And I hope that we have a great conversation this evening. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Wes Falconet. I am running for the seat that Peggy is currently representing, so she described for you where that is located. I'd like to thank Sarah for the invitation to be here tonight, and of course Mary T for hosting, but especially thanking those of you who came. How many of you sitting out here grew up in Coon Rapids area? Any of you grew up in Coon Rapids? We're in Coon Rapids now.
I grew up in Andover, but I moved.
Good. Well, I did grow up in Coon Rapids. In fact, my school bus used to come right down on Northdale Boulevard on our 3-mile trip to Hamilton Elementary over on 111th. I then moved to Anoka before 7th grade, and my wife and I live up in Andover. We moved up there 16 years ago. I've been a social studies teacher. I've been a special education teacher. I worked in learning disabilities, and I worked with educational mentally handicapped students. 26 years ago, I got out of teaching. I started working for Hennepin County. I do processing of work in the public assistance area. In particular, I'm an expert on STAP, which is the old food stamp program, and I'm also a person that's worked with both the GA and the MSA programs. Partly because of that background and my past teaching background in special education, very proud to say that the DFL Disability Caucus gave me one of their first endorsements this year, and it is one that I treasure.
Thank you. And Mr. Sanford.
Thank you. Brad Sanford. I am running, the only one here from Senate District 37. I'm looking to be your senator if you are from Blaine, Coon Rapids, and a little bit of Spring Lake Park. I graduated from Blaine High School. I went away to play football in Missouri, came back, and I have 4 kids. I've always been active in politics, but my kids always came first. And now 3 of them are in college, and the last one has aspirations of going to college, so we're all set there, so now I can be on the ticket. I was a banker for a long time, just recently changed to be an insurance agent so that I could become the senator. And being a banker is a lot like being a bartender. You listen to a lot of the problems of the city, and through hearing all that, it kind of made me think I needed to get active and I needed to help those people out. So that's why I got into politics.
Thank you. Thank you all. So we're going to start with our questions, and our first question is going to go to Mr. Johnson. And all of our candidates, just so our audience knows, all of our candidates receive these questions ahead of time. So our industry is facing a workforce crisis. There are simply not enough people to provide the direct care needed for children and adults with disabilities to lead independent lives. Moreover, high turnover and employee retention struggles have amplified the crisis. ARM's most recent workforce survey showed an overall turnover rate of 44% and a startling 57% turnover rate for those in their job for less than a year. And when we talk about those in their job, we're referring to direct support professionals. How will you make addressing the workforce crisis and disability services a top priority at the legislature if elected or re-elected?
Well, thank you, Sarah. That's a very simple question. I know that's part of your first legislative priority. I want to let you know, all of you, that I have read the ARMS website. I read your vision statement. I read the concerns that you have. I know that this organization has been around for 46 years, that you've been working hard in the area of disability and trying to take care of people with disablements of all kinds for a very long time. In fact, it's such a long time that if we were to have followed the prescript of Hubert H. Humphrey, which was so eloquently quoted by my neighbor here on my right, I wouldn't think that today we'd have the kinds of issues that we're facing. It's disturbing to me, frankly, that we have workers taking care of people that are making wages so low that we have such an enormous turnover. I know that to take the number of individuals that you have working with disabled people and move them all in the direction of $15 an hour, which of course seems to be some sort of a number that is related to what a lot of groups are trying to get. Whether it's people who work in Minneapolis, whether it's people who work for Walmart, whether it's people who work anywhere to try to make a living that they can live on. I know that that would take about $225 million of state coffer money in order to do that. And that's per year. So if we were to pass legislation with a 2-year bill, it would be $450 million of new money poured into the kinds of organizations that you here represent. And then when you add the wage increases that would follow thereon for managers that are above that $15 level, we're easily talking about adding on about $500 million. That's $500 million over a biennium. So the question looms for all of us to consider is how on earth can we loosen up $500 million of brand new money out of the state legislature when we have a plethora of wants and needs in our communities and in our state. You know, this is just one great forum, and I'm really glad to be invited here, but if we were to go to a forum of all of the organizations that have sent all of us as candidates a letter in the mail asking us to support their cause one way or another, I don't know how many the rest of you received. I've got 27 of that count, with 9 that don't require any money at all. That's like people who want to drive a motorcycle without a helmet. That won't take any money. But the ones that take money, you know, this is a struggle here for an amount of money which is, if you add it all up, you have a world of impossibilities. And so what that really kind of boils down to is trying to answer the question, well, where are you going to get more money into the coffers? You can't get money from poor people that don't have it. You have to get it from people that have it. And we're keep getting told all the time, money is moving to the 1%. Well, then we're going to have to go to the people, the wealthiest people in our state, and we're going to ask them to have to pay more. We're going to solve your problems, and I'd love to do that. I'd love to carry the bill to solve your problems, but we're going to have to increase the amount of money flowing into the state to do that. That's enough for me for now.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the question. To just rephrase the question, how should we prioritize and address the workforce crisis facing those that work with folks with disabilities? And actually, to answer this, I'm going to go back a little bit. I used to actually work at a home health care agency, and that agency ended up closing because of this very problem. So I know firsthand how difficult it is to find people that are passionate and that want to stay and work in direct care. And this past legislative session, we did do some great reform in our Health and Human Services Committee by increasing the wages for those that work in nursing home settings and in boarding home facilities, the 5% campaign. And so I think that this next session we should probably be prioritizing those that work in the direct care settings, because right now we do have an unfair setup. If you're a CNA and you work in a hospital, you get paid more than working in direct care typically. So trying to make that less unfair is definitely a priority. One of the ways that I think we can do that is actually by finding areas in the state budget currently to save. So actually one of my colleagues authored a bill that was going to try and find all of the waste, fraud, and abuse in government. For example, they did this in Illinois. But in Illinois, they found $100 million in savings from people that were on public programs that actually either were no longer living or didn't live in the state, and various other things. So we think that it makes sense to do a similar audit of our state government, find areas where we can save that money, and this bill actually would have directed that money, the savings, into increasing wages for folks in direct care settings. So I think that's definitely something we need to continue to work on in this next session, and I hope that we can make some forward progress on that.
Right, so the wage issue is always a big issue for everybody, and finding quality people. Door knocking, and I've talked to a couple of people that are PCAs, and their wages are pretty low. One lady's explaining to me how she has to work at McDonald's, and I couldn't remember the other jobs she worked in order to make enough to do what she loved, which was being a PCA. I do agree with Abigail that we do need to, and with Roger, that we need to increase funding for it. I do believe it's going to have to be new money. I don't think we're going to find as much money as my competition here thinks there is in government and waste. I know there's always talks about waste here and there, and there's some everywhere. Every government's got it, every institution's got it. It'd be great if we could get rid of it and eliminate all waste. It's just not likely to happen. So we do need to talk about new money, which I agree with Roger on the fact that we should be looking at possibly a tax increase for the rich, so that they, so we can afford to pay for the services that are needed for both the disabled and for the elderly. We want to provide quality locations like this one here that we're actually at today, that we're going to provide good service. So like I said, basically we need to bring new money in, and we can look for the waste. I agree with that. My wife works for the Department of Human Services, so I do actually have some hands. I hear some of the stuff that goes on. I do get to hear how bills don't make sense to workers at the state, and how some programs they think are helping is actually hurting, and vice versa. Some things that they think are hurting people actually help. So I do look at that, and I listen to what, I ask my wife questions all the time, so I know what's going on the inside. So I think from my perspective, I get a little extra insight as to what's going on the state side of it. So being a legislator, I think I'll have that advantage to be able to hopefully work with those departments to figure out what budget's going to work.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, as Abigail alluded to, we did actually have a vote on the Best Life campaign this year, which was the 5% for people that give direct care. And we were going to pay for that from a bill by one of our colleagues, and there were skeptics that didn't think that we could come up with that money. But shortly after that, it was ironic, the legislative auditor did an audit and found that there was $230 million in just 6 months that he found in waste, fraud, and abuse in the venture program. And most of it was people receiving the benefits that didn't qualify for them. So I think that is an area that we need to look at. And I'm proud too that in 2012, I think it was, when we had a $6 billion budget deficit. Representative Abler and Senator Hand worked super hard. That was when we had majorities, and they worked super hard to hold the disability community harmless during that time, even with a $6 billion budget deficit. And I feel like I'm pretty proud of our caucus. We've always supported this community and want to take care of the most vulnerable, and we are more than open to look at creative ways to do that. And this last year also, we funded in the disparities funding bill that we had an additional $1 million for state services for the blind, and that was to help them live independently. And another $1 million for the Centers for Independent Living. So there's lots more work to do, and I want you to know that I'm behind the effort here and really want to support it in any way that we can.
Well, of course, we all worked on the same questions, and I'll just remind you, this one was, how are we addressing the workforce crisis and disability services and making it a top priority in the legislature if we're elected? So several of us have come up with a common theme. It did not pass in 2016, so if I am elected, I will support the reintroduction of the Best Life Alliance bill in 2017. It had an estimated $90 million price tag. In this past session, I would assume that means we'll probably have at least a $95 million price tag in the next session. I know I'm talking to the choir here on this, but let's just remind ourselves what highlights were in that particular bill. It had that 5% increase that both Abigail and Peggy have alluded to. It's for home and community-based services and for intermediate care facilities. It's not only intended to support people with disabilities, but it's also intended for older adults and caregivers. Providers, I thought this was a very important piece of it. Providers would have to submit a quality of life plan as well as a person-centered initiative in order to be able to retain that full increase. I like putting on reasons that people have to be able to meet that particular goal. 90% of that new revenue was designated for workforce compensation that was required to be used for increased employee-related costs. And it is not directly for people in the management contract. And what I really thought was most significant is the estimate is that it would have a direct impact on nearly 100,000 Minnesota caregivers, and direct support professionals. This is a bill that has a wide impact on the state of Minnesota, and I think that it is a necessity for us to reintroduce it in the next session.
Well, you know, I would concur with what everybody else has said. That's going last or second to last. You know, you always get to say, yes, those guys also. But, you know, this is one of the reasons I got into politics, is we tend to put legislation in place and fix a symptom. We don't go to the final end and make sure that the legislation we put in place solves the problem long term. We only take care of that one symptom. And so, if and when I get elected, that's the practice that I'll bring to the legislature. I will always understand what the bill is going to do to the business, what it'll do to the community, and what it'll do to the industry, so that we see that we're taking care of more than just this one symptom. So that's how I would approach the issue.
And finally, Senator.
I want to commend you all for sitting through the same questions. That's amazing. So let me just give you a little different answer. Certainly there's a need for more pay for the workers, but actually, as you look at the state budget and then the projections, which are actually a little off this time, we're down $90 million or something, so it's a little frightening. There is not enough people to go around to serve all of you, and there's not enough money to make the raises you need. I ran into a provider in Brooklyn Park a few months ago, and as an experiment, she tried a 30% raise, not just 5% like the Best Life people want. And she got one call. And like, oh no. And so the question is, how do we bring in the people that love to serve you? And these individuals who serve and want to make this career are amazing people. So how do we give them a career ladder? How do we help them stay? How do we help them feel like they're challenged and have an amazing career? And actually, Mary T has been one leading the way with this apartment living, with technology. And that's not the answer for everybody. Some people belong in a 4-person place. Some people belong in a larger facility. Some people can live in a little roommate or even by themselves. And so in my idea of the model, if we could work it out so that people that are more capable and have capacity to be on their own more are given some flexibility to be with a roommate or whatever. And there's like maybe 10 apartments somewhere and one person watching them all night long. And so that person would get a pretty good pay, 15, 18, 20 bucks an hour. That's a hard job, a lot of responsibility. And then there'd be supervisors and career ladders that could be for the same money. Because it turns out you save some money when you take people and put them in one of these independent housing options. You capture that money and do it a little differently. And so I think some of you there's seniors, there's some people with special needs here. I think as you put your heads together and think, what would I like? What's the best thing I could ever have? What would I want to live at Mary T, clearly. I mean, there's no better place. So for you, the problem is solved. But for those others, those have-nots who live at Mary R somewhere, all those sad place. How can we help them out? So I think that's what I would offer. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next question is going to go to Representative Whalen first. Minnesota, like other states, will be facing additional challenges as the population ages and more people are faced with disabilities. How should Minnesota address the increasing demand for services and the impact the demographic change will have on the state's budget?
Thank you, Sarah, again. So the trend used to be you might have 12 to 15 people looking after one retiree, so you take that income and you help look after a retiree. Now, in 2014, that number was 2.5. So we're seeing a lot of demographic changes and shifts, not just in this area, but in many areas. So how do you get ahead of that? How do you stay ahead of that? I think one of the first ways we do that is just by what we're doing tonight. We're having a conversation about it. We're bringing awareness to it. And you all, by going to your elected officials, can say this needs to be a priority for the state. And I think that's number one. So making sure that we're having those conversations. I also think that it's really important that we have a well-trained workforce and that we get ahead of this trend so that when it's needed, there are people that are prepared to help care for the increased needs that we're going to be experiencing. So again, something that we did last session, we actually provided tuition reimbursements for CNAs that would work 90 days after they graduate in a nursing home or another care facility. So again, that's a model. We could do something similar for folks in direct care. And we could make sure that people, when they're going to school and when they're choosing a career path, know this is a great option and that it will help that they will be able to put food on the table also, you know, they have to make a living. So trying to balance all of those things and harness the potential of people in school now so that when the time comes, there's a workforce ready is number 2. And then finally, kind of already touched on this a little bit, but prioritization. I think that we have limited resources. Even if you know, you took all the money from every person in the state, there would still be people that think, well, we should spend more here and less here. And so you just have to have a conversation about priorities. I think government needs to fund transportation, public safety, education, those are top. And then the most vulnerable in our society, I think that's a Minnesota value. I think most people would agree that we need to help those that are the most in need, and that's something that I will, entrusted with the responsibility of serving again, continue to work for. Thank you.
All right, so obviously our trend is going to be heading towards more elderly and disabled in our state as time goes by. I have to agree with Abigail on a bunch of notes on there, because the reality is that's pretty much where all of us probably are going to be. I do believe, most importantly, we do need to prioritize, and we have to take and look at what we're providing and say, and ask the most important question is what's a want and what's a need. So that's the biggest part of prioritization is everybody wants something, but the reality is what do we need in order to make sure that we're taking care of you. We want to meet your basic necessities, and then on top of that, maybe if there's money left over, provide some of the extra wants. But we have to start by looking at what our needs are. Our needs are making sure that you're in a safe environment for, if you're disabled, make sure you're in a safe environment for your disability. If you're elderly, same thing, making sure that you're in a safe environment for, we don't want somebody who's in their 80s walking down a flight of stairs like, you know, like a step ladder. So we want to make sure that we're providing for our people what's needed first, and then start looking at their wants. Obviously, we are, like Jim brought up, we do not have enough people in the workforce for this area. Part of that, we can start getting people excited, or not excited, but trying to get people more involved and wanting to look at this as a career by doing things at the junior high and high school levels of introducing kids more to the elderly, bring them into the schools, have them talk, because the reality is kids are impressionable, they love dealing with the, you'd be amazed that grandmother or grandparent syndrome is what you get a lot of times, and for the elderly it's going to be a good thing if we can get those kids to start to build those relationships with older people if they don't have that already at home, so that they start to understand the needs. And they'll start, you know, the kids that have a kind heart, they're going to be more apt to want to move towards that industry if they see it when they're younger. And also, you know, we've already streamlined or tried to streamline disabled kids in schools, and I'd like to see that continue too, because that will help bring the awareness to kids of other disabilities. And you see it when you're in elementary schools where they have kids with certain disabilities. I can remember when I was a kid, we had a kid in a wheelchair, and it was amazing how many kids actually wanted to help him get through his day. And that just builds that excitement in their minds, and that's something that they'll grow on them. They're going to want to go to school to help them, or they might come right out of high school being able to help them. Some of the needs aren't going to be education. There's no education required. Having a kind heart and wanting to help is sometimes all that it really takes.
Thank you. This is hard as it goes on, because some of the things that I have, you know, written down are the things that have already been said. And, you know, I really love the idea of exposing school kids to the older generation, and whether that's a service day at a nursing home, whether it's bringing in older folks or folks with disabilities to the school. Either way, I think it's super important to expose our kids to all sorts of people. And I remember my grandfather was in a nursing home and had Alzheimer's, and my daughter was about 3 years old. And I remember going in there, and she just took to him, was feeding him toast, and she's in nursing school today. And I just think that there are kids that have that within them, that they want to help serve other people. And if we can tap into that, I think we are miles ahead. And I do think that getting ahead of on the education and making sure that we have good programs in the schools, even in high school and in the community colleges and higher up, so that people can advance in working with people with disability is a real positive. And one of the things, and kind of goes in with an answer later too, but Tom Gillespie, who's our former demographer of the state of Minnesota, I remember having a conversation with him one time, and he was talking about the silver tsunami and what it would mean to our state. And he really saw it as a resource. So not everyone that retires is gonna, not be of good health. And so those are some people that we can tap into that resource. And maybe we have nonprofits that organize those folks to be volunteers to drive people, provide some of the transportation to and from people's jobs or to and from their doctor's appointments. And they come in and maybe they do light housework, and maybe they just act as a companion to some of these folks. So I think there are some things that government can do, but I think there's some things that the nonprofit community can do. And I know if I'm fortunate enough to retire someday and I'm in good health, this is the kind of stuff that I want to do. I don't want to sit around all day and watch, whatever on TV. I want to be involved in the community. So those are some of my suggestions.
Thank you.
Sarah, before the meeting today, we were chatting about where ARRM has been doing some other forums. Can you just share with the group where a couple of those locations were before this one tonight?
You betcha. We were in Roseville, Mankato, and St. Cloud last week. Here tonight, and we'll be in Roseville or Rochester and Minnetonka next week.
A couple of the places that she referenced, Rochester next week, Mankato, St. Cloud, outstate Minnesota. I like to do research. That's my style of approaching issues. I pulled up a piece from the League of Minnesota Cities on the changing demographics of Minnesota. This is why my question to Sarah was so important. In 35 counties already, more than 1 in 5 residents is 65 and older. And they think that's going to be true for the whole state by 2030. Most of those counties right now are in rural Minnesota. The percentage of older adults, 65 and older, is in fact highest in greater Minnesota. The population as a whole, however, is of course concentrated here in the Twin Cities. There's a big disconnect on where we are able to place people and how we look at this for our job force. What are we going to be doing in rural Minnesota? I used to teach years ago in Jackson, Minnesota, county seat with 3,000 people. I know there's a county seat in Minnesota with only 784 people. When we're trying to talk about how we're going to approach this, it isn't just what's happening here in our metro area, but we really have to take into account what's happening as we move outside of the 7-county or even the 11-county metro area, and try to anticipate what this changing demographic is actually going to mean. Another comment they made is that it shows that the statewide population of people 65 and older is actually going to be greater than the school-age population, ages 5 to 17, by 2020. That's only 4 years away from now. And older adults are going to be more numerous than the entire child population under age 18 by 2035. That's in our immediate lifetimes. Children being born now, about the time they graduate from high school, we're going to see that total shift of demographics. I really think a lot of emphasis is beyond the state level. A lot of what we have to be talking about is going to have to happen at the city and county level. Last night we heard in one of our forums, in the candidate forums, real concern about the Metropolitan Council, that this is the type of thing that in the metro area comes under their current purview. And we have to figure out how we're going to address the type of housing stock, how we're going to address those opportunities that are made available in our communities to deal with this change.
Thank you. I got a taste of what you guys go through with that question. Mr. Sanford.
I would agree with things that have been said. Maybe taxing the 1% I might disagree with. I think, having read your website, I like the idea of approaching the private sector and getting them involved. Oftentimes, having worked at big banks, they take on these ideas and these movements like United Way, Habitat for Humanity. What's wrong with them taking on Margaret T's or Margaret R's or Margaret Mary K's, or anything like that? I think that that's a better approach. I think telling people what they have to do as opposed to asking them to get involved and getting them excited, getting those kids excited in high school to help out. Those are the more real answers that we need to look for. Those are the ways that we're going to get our community excited about each other. And I don't think you're human if you don't want to help anybody else, right? I think everybody has it in them to want to help. And you just need to give them that little push. You just need to give them that little, here's what we need from you. Here's what we're looking for from you. And I think that will get us to where we're looking to go.
Well, thank you. And I hope you're enjoying the conversation. It's actually a pretty good dialogue. If this is the state budget, this is like $45. There's like 10, each one's $1 billion. Who wants a billion? Anyway, there's a lot of competition for this. And anybody think that schools are important? Thank you. How about roads? Do you think they're important? Who likes the police? They have them around, fire trucks to come and fight fires.
Nope.
Ambulances need them. And so, you know, for this $5 billion here, there's a lot of competition. And that's the challenge that we face. And so what's the priority? How do you become a priority? And so it's one of my priorities. And when I had the privilege to be a chairman in 2011 and we were dead broke, we were extremely kind to this niche because it was a priority. And so in terms of what's important to me, if you make a priority of life, which is respect for all the people who are existing and their quality of life and opportunities, and how do you keep the staff valued? A lot of that takes care of itself, but I'll tell you, when the push comes to shove, and they come to your door and they want more money for Anoka Ramsey Technical, Anoka Ramsey College, or you want something, building a building to make great discoveries, to lengthen your life, which is the reason we're here. Back 100 years ago, people lived to be 30 and 40 was common. And so how nice it is that we have the problem with people who have some kind of special need, or somebody who's older gets to actually still be here. So we will tackle it, but it's a matter of priorities, and it's a matter of trying to find a way to do the best we can. It doesn't come, what you've not heard tonight is any kind of stridency. You've heard people focusing on the challenge and the problem. That is the way to deal with this, in a collaborative way with all these good ideas. So stay engaged and wish us luck.
And Mr. Johnson.
I guess I'm the old man on the panel.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
I was a teenager when my opponent was born. And this beautiful young woman sitting next to me is, could be my granddaughter. Great granddaughter. Not that old. But I will be shortly. So since I'm ahead of all of them in age, maybe I've been thinking about these kinds of things, wondering whether I should follow in Peggy Scott's suggestion that soon I should just maybe show up at a place like this and maybe help somebody, and maybe I can do some housekeeping and things like that. But I like to think I have still something, not fire in the belly, to offer something that maybe us more aged candidates could offer. The Wes, the Vulcan down there, took a little bit of my speed when he said, he quoted a statistic that has been bothering me for a long time. And that is, 4 years from now, the number of people in the state of Minnesota who are over 65 years of age will outnumber the number of children in our K-12 education system. That K-12 education system I have some familiarization with, as well as the higher education system, because I have spent 40 years in higher education in the state of Minnesota. And while I was working in my community, I helped the parent legislative team of our K-12 schools for 10 years, lobbying for children in the legislature. So I am concerned that we have enough money for our children in our schools. But as I age, I continue to become more concerned that there will be someone there to take care of me soon. And I don't know, I've had some health issues. I may need the kinds of things a personal care attendant can provide. And I'll get there ahead of it. So I'd like some of those things taken care of by the state legislature before I get there. Your question talks about the demographics, but also talks about how should we address it? How should the state legislature address that? We have 37 colleges in our public college system, in addition to the University of Minnesota. I worked at one of them. This afternoon, Jim and I were over at Ramsey Community College, where they're being considered one of the top 10 colleges in the United States. I know that our colleges in Minnesota can design programs to try to create career paths for individuals that can move into the kinds of jobs that you're concerned about, trying to move up to $15 an hour jobs. We can create those sort of things and try to create a desire on the part of students that can come in there, that they can have a career which they can live on. And so, we need to move in that direction. And so, as long as we've got good colleges, why not have a programmatic aspect to what we're doing to make sure that our colleges get involved in providing personal care attendants through programs. We provide nurses, we provide LPNs, we provide CNAs, we do all these other things. We ought to be able to work a little bit more and make the employees that care for people a more professional group of individuals. So I think, and we need to do that in the face of a declining economic or individuals, employees that can work in the state of Minnesota. There's only 3 ways to generate money. And if we're going to, it's grow it, agribusiness, mine it, or manufacture it. We've got to pay attention to those 3 areas and make sure that we have the growth in the economy so that the people that work in those, that are still working, can pay the taxes necessary to support the programs that you have. So it is a very big challenge. Jim Aver's been working on that challenge for a long time. We need to get this more into the solutions soon. Because I'm not getting any younger.
Our next question is going to go to Mr. Hillebrand first. To live independently as successfully as possible in the community, children and adults with disabilities have a variety of needs that must be met. For example, housing, transportation, employment, personal supports, and health care, to name a few. Pick one of these needs and tell us what you would do to improve the outcomes for people with disabilities in this area.
Well, I think we'll go with employment. We've got organizations out there right now, like Opportunity Partners and those, that actually do provide jobs for disabled through mentoring programs, through supervised work programs and whatnot. I've actually experienced it because I worked with Opportunity Partners when I worked with RETAX and had them actually supplying some of my staff for our marketing stuff, which I did against the views of corporate office and a few others, because I thought it was very important that we get involved in those types of areas when I was working there. It was a great area for them to get people jobs and Aspire. Organizations supported Opportunity Partners. I know they've got a few different fundraisers, and they do get some government funding. And those types of programs are what I'd like to push more for. I know we've heard from a couple people that we want to see some more non-governmental formats, and that is one of them that I actually do agree with, is that we do need to be pushing those outside organizations that are willing to be able to do that. So that's what if we could find money to provide some of the dollars that they need to run those programs, because I know Opportunity Partners like to say, we're paying a certain level for those employees, but that's not what the actual true costs were. So I got my employer to donate to it. Obviously, on both sides, we actually paid for the employees, plus we actually did some donations. And trying to get the larger corporations to donate, and then obviously having the government push, have some funding there for the government to provide some of those types of services as well. Because if you've got people with disabilities, you don't want to leave them sitting around the room saying, they can't do anything. And the reality is, the key people I saw working for me, they have limited capabilities, and we learned to deal with them. And the person that I worked with through Opportunity Partners explained to me what the abilities were of the people that they sent to me. And the last year when I was corporate, I was actually going to have 3 people, and they were going to be supervised. So that was actually, to me, a good thing. And I'd like to see those types of programs continue. So that's something that I really I actually work on that aspect of it, making sure that we have good employment. And at the same time, along with that employment, maybe a little bit of education for those disabled on how to work with their disabilities. I mean, that's one of the most important things, I think. If you have disabilities, if you don't know what you can and can't do, you need to be also educating them on what they can do and what their abilities are.
Thank you.
Perfect timing.
What was the deal for you? Again, I kind of alluded to this in the earlier question, but I would really like to see at large some nonprofits, and even as Mr. Sanford suggested, the for-profit businesses and so forth that have, and many of them do have great programs that they have thousands of hours that their employees volunteer every year. And I would really like to see that on a broader scope as we move forward. And I think that there are many people that will be retiring or have already retired that are going to be a great resource for our state and have the heart to help others. One of the ladies that helps drive me around door knocking, she works part-time with in this sort of area. She's going to be turning 70 soon. And she said, I never ask for reimbursement for when I drive my car, even if it's to St. Cloud or whatever. And she goes, I don't tell them that I would do this whether they paid me or not. So I think there are a lot of people with those kind of, with that big of a heart that are willing to help out. So I would really like to see and push for that. Mr. Volknat.
Well, again, we've all done this ahead of time and kind of prepared, and guess what? I've also picked employment, but a little different direction with it. And I prepared some remarks. So, is it heresy for me to say that I want us to be like Vermont, the home of Ben and Jerry's, the home of Bernie Sanders? Yeah, he says yes. But I'm going to tell you why we might want to look at Vermont. I used the 2015 series that the Star Trib did on people with disabilities for a lot of the research I was looking at this afternoon before the meeting. Vermont stopped doing state funding of sheltered workshops in 2002. They also ended the use of Medicaid that same year to subsidize group homes for people with disabilities. In Minnesota, we pay more than $220 million in state and federal Medicaid funds to our sheltered workshops and training programs. Instead, in Vermont, that money is sent directly to the disabled clients for services of their own choosing. They choose things like transportation and job coaching for help. Today, Vermont leads the nation on the path to workplace inclusion. Our model is very inefficient. It costs nearly 10 times the amount of helping disabled workers find jobs in the community. In Vermont, the median annual income for non-institutionalized persons with cognitive disabilities is over $6,000 greater than similar Minnesotans. I do like Vermont's approach to centralized job services and their use of community inclusion facilitators, whose job is to create jobs for their clients by working with the local employers. This supported employment model survives with a strong job coaching system. And they've proven jobs can be found. In Vermont, social workers placed over 80% of the final shelter workshop employees into jobs in their community, other jobs in their community. I believe that we need to take a strong look at how we are proceeding in Minnesota and consider what they are doing in Vermont and elsewhere in the country.
Mr. Sanford.
You know, I have a friend that works in this industry, and she said that there was a law passed that gave additional rights to patients. But what that law didn't do is it didn't provide the funding so that they can be provided those services. And the law just left it to the employer. And so, no shock, having been a banker and a business banker, I'm going after the employment one, because I think if we can give people jobs, I think that gives them a sense of pride. And that goes a long ways. She told me that she could take a job at Aldi's and get a $4 an hour pay raise. That is atrocious. We have somebody taking care of someone else, and we're not paying them better than we would to go shopping at a grocery store. It's added tons of paperwork, and the training being provided by the homes. I've worked with a lot of businesses that are begging for employees. Why couldn't we get a business to come into the home and train these people to get them to the level where they could, for the next job that's available, they could take that position. They're begging for people to work for them. If we put the onus on the business to volunteer in the community and to provide the education and training for people to be able to work for them, we've solved two problems, right? The business owner gets the employees, and then we have jobs that we can take, and the training can be done for people in that case. I think that's our real life answer. That's what a politician should be doing for their community. One of the things that I want to do is, if and when I get elected, I don't want you to see me every 4 years. I want to go out, and I want to come back to Market Tees, and I want to implement this program, and then I want to do a video log and talk about what we thought we could do, what came to fruition, and how we got it accomplished, and have a conversation just like we're having now. I think you should see us more than just every 4 years or every 2 years. I think you should see us, every year and ask us questions. How can we better it? Okay, we did this, but can we do it a little bit better? Can we get another company involved? This is one of my passions that I would bring to the legislature, is making sure that we get a workforce for this industry.
Well, I think I'll go with housing just for novelty, if nothing else.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. I mean, those are all really well-made points. I believe that the residents in the audience elected to come to this place. I don't think any of you were, kidnapped and brought here against your will. And I think that there's a lot of really good opportunities here for quite an array of individuals, and Mary T has really been a leader at that. Anyway, not everybody has that opportunity. Some people are trapped in homes with four there. And there's nothing wrong with those, but the opportunities are smaller. You may not like the other three people very well. And so imagine if the four of us, pick any four people, now you have to live with them forever. That may not be your choice. And so there's a lot that can be done, but I think you have to remember it has to be done within kind of the dollars that are available, and trying to emphasize the highest quality of service. DHS is not known for being frugal in the right ways. They're frugal in the wrong ways. They squeeze the things that shouldn't be squeezed, and they throw money down away in so many ways that you would never spend it that way. And so part of that way would be to capture where the housing, the money follows the person in their housing. So that's not hard to do, and it doesn't cost a lot of money, but the results can be amazing. And so that's what I actually tend to focus on in this session. Should I be fortunate to be elected.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Sarah. You and your organization knows how to ask the most difficult questions. You wrap all that around three very tight questions. Brad obviously agrees with me. When I go back a little bit to think about, remember when George Herbert Walker Bush was elected president of the United States? I remember when during his acceptance speech or something, he kept talking about 1,000 points of light. And I always wondered, what's he talking about? And of course it was that with the churches and the prophets and nonprofits and all of the organizations of people like the ARRM and others that are caring for people's needs in America, that there were thousands of points of light. Each point of light was an organization like the one that maybe brought you here tonight. That impressed me. I thought, this is really a giving nation. It's a giving state. We are a giving society that generally really wants to care for ourselves. And whenever we can find those 1,000 points of light in our community to help care for us, whether it's in housing or transportation or health care or efficiencies or personal care attendance, I'm all in favor of that. And if that comes through volunteerism and saves the state money, I'm in favor of Where the rubber hits the road for me though is when I think that someday I'm gonna go into some elder care facility. I wanna make sure that when my children come to visit me, they don't walk out of there saying, this housing for dad stinks and I don't like it. This is a nice, clean, healthy place. And when they look at me, realizing I need to go to the doctor for something, I want there to be adequate transportation to take me there and bring me back. And I want well-trained, well-paid personal care attendants to attend for me so that I don't sit in bed in my own stench. And I want, efficiencies are fine, but I want some faces to look in at me once in a while and let me know that I'm okay, they're okay, they know about me, what I need next, so that I can live the rest of my life in some degree of decency. That's what I want. And I want that for you. And to the extent that you don't have that, I want to be someone in the state legislature that helps you get closer to that goal. We ought to be thinking about that when we talk about caring for the people at the dawn of life, Abigail, people at the twilight of life, and the rest of us in between that need care. That's when the legislature ought to step forward and have something important to say for this community. That's it.
Thank you. So I also prepared to talk a little bit about employment, but I might shift it a little bit and combine that with personal care services and transportation also, just for a change of pace. So I serve on the transportation committee, and one of the things that we're facing right now in our state is obviously a transportation crisis for everyone. We need our roads and bridges repaired. We need more funding to make sure that we can get goods and services where they need to be and people where they need to be. So that was one thing that we really tried to prioritize and work very hard on this past session. And again, I'm elected to serve again, I'll continue to work on that. And there are services and companies that help provide specific transfers, not just on public transit, but private companies that can bring people with disabilities and others to jobs from their place of living. So making sure that that happens is definitely a priority, that people can still get to their place of employment. Because as the Olmsted plan advocated for, we want folks to have as much choice as possible, but to have those choices, obviously you need to have the ability to get where you want to go. So transportation is key for kind of all of the things that we're talking about. And then with regard to personal care services and helping people make choices, I just want to highlight a couple of things that we did this past session. Representative Scott already touched on one. We put $1 million into helping folks with technology, training, and tools for those that were blind, visually impaired, or deaf, to get services to help them get and retain a job and other things like that. And then we also put $1 million into Centers for Independent Living, which are nonprofit agencies that assist individuals to live independently. And so that we made that a priority last session. We'll continue to make those things a priority. And I think that, again, just having conversations like this are really key to that. So I know we get closing statements, but thank you again for being part of this conversation.
Thank you. So we're right at 7:15. I want to make sure we end by 7:30. With such a large area of candidates, I want to make sure our audience has time to come up to their individual candidates and ask you guys any questions you have. So we're going to move to closing statements. But I wonder, within the closing statements, to allow our audience to better get to know you, you can touch on a few of your other priorities besides disability services that you would focus on if elected or re-elected. And we'll start with your absence.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for a really good conversation. I know I learned just from being here, and I hope you did too. And I think I can speak for everybody, we welcome your ideas, and we welcome your input. And I just want to say also that one of the things that is the most rewarding part of this job is helping constituents with issues when they run into roadblocks. And, I know I had an instance where a young man at our church is wheelchair bound and had lost his job, and his mother was just beside herself because he's in his early 30s and was just feeling, kind of demoralized. And it was just a matter of me making a phone call to the county, and within a week or two, he was back working. So please know that we're available. If I'm reelected, please know that I'm available to help you in any way that I can. And make, you know, if it's just, hopefully it can all be solved with just one phone call, but not always, but just want to make myself available. Just a little bit about me. At the legislature, I'm the chair of the Civil Law Data Practices Committee, and I spend a lot of time, civil law is anything that's not criminal law. So it's insurance law, it's banking law, it's family law, and so I spend a lot of time on family law issues and trying to make a healthier family for the state of Minnesota. And I want to continue working on that. The data privacy part of it is trying to keep your private data private from the eyes of government. And on the other side of that is making government more transparent so we know what government is doing. So I'll be continuing to work on those issues. And I guess I'll wrap it up so we can get on down the line. So if you have audience questions, we can take those. Thank you.
Thanks. One of the things when I was preparing for this that struck me was a philosophy statement that Mary T. itself uses. People are treated with the same dignity, respect, and understanding that we expect of ourselves. We should expect this of our legislators, shouldn't we? I think this is going to be a challenging year ahead for all of you that are in this particular professional area. You have the challenge of getting very necessary legislation passed. I think you heard Jim Abler comment earlier. That's not easy, trying to find those priorities. I think we heard in an earlier forum that of the many thousands of pieces of legislation that will be introduced, literally about 200 pieces of legislation will get through the next session of the legislature. You've got the challenge, as Abigail referenced a few minutes ago, of the compliance with the Olmstead Plan, which is only going to be 2 years out from implementation. And you have thousands of Minnesotans that are going to be in flux as their residences and their working situations, their connections with their families are going to continue to evolve. I was struck by the fact that over 62% of our group home residents are currently housed in locations in greater Minnesota. You have to think about where the bulk of our population is. That connection with families, I think, is going to be very important in the challenge ahead. I'm not a social work professional. I'm not in your industry. I don't have some of the history that the people at this table have. But what I do have is heart and passion, and I hope that's what you are looking for with your legislators. My model of a great legislator is John Hoffman, senator from District 36 in Coon Rapids and Champlin. This is a man who, this type of area, disabilities, and taking care of the people in his constituency is paramount. And we see that from him over and over in the places that he spends his time. I'll just, Sarah, you threw in to comment. I'm going to just mention one that Roger and Andy and myself have actually picked up as an issue during the course of the campaign as something very serious to us. Peggy knows I mentioned this at our forum up in Andover last night, but it's very important to me. You all saw the news last week of the Thailand-U.S. sex slave ring that was busted and had Minnesota connections. It is one of the most serious underlying issues in our communities here in Coon Rapids, Andover, Anoka areas. Human trafficking of girls ages 11 to 14. They are at their most vulnerable and susceptible ages in that time frame. And it is a problem that isn't just about Thailand and the U.S. It's a problem in our own communities. I think it is our intention, if elected, that we're bringing legislation to assist the Anoka County Sheriff's Office as well as the Minnesota Sheriff's Association in being able to put the funds towards being able to have the full-time staffing to be able to address this problem. It is a bipartisan issue, and I hope that we'll be encouraging and working with Republicans across the metropolitan area to deal with this as well.
Thank you. Mr. Sanford.
And a little bit about me. I'm on a couple boards. I save puppies and kitties. I'm on the Midwest Animal Rescue and Services board. I'm also on the Girls Spring Lake Park Fast Pitch Association. I also have taught junior achievement for 6 years for my daughters and one of my best friend's daughters. So I've been very active in the community. I won't go on because we don't have a lot of time. But some of the things that I want to take action in would be the correction of MNsure. Not necessarily get rid of it, repeal it, but let's look at correcting it first. If it can't be corrected, then we need to come up with a better answer. Remove the taxation on Social Security income. We're one of 7 states that do that, or 6 states that left do that. That shouldn't be a group that we should be in. And then long-term financing for roads and bridges. We can't get our products in and out of this state if we can't have the roads for them to go on, right? And your industry here, who wouldn't be for the industry, right? It's a very important part of our community. And I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that what we're doing down at the legislature is, as I believe it was Jim that said, you have a choice of wants or needs. And it seems like we have to pack all of our wants into a 2-year time frame. I think you guys should be a need. It should be a priority. It should be something that has to get done. And so if elected, I would make that a priority down at the state and make sure that we take care of you. And not just take care of a symptom. Let's take care of the whole thing long term, right? Just like we want to take care of roads and bridges long term. Let's take care of it long term and get the private businesses involved.
Well, thank you. And so thanks for having us. This is, I think, productive. I hope it was interesting for all the folks here. This is really, really important. And as you know, I've invested a good deal of energy, and it's been not work. It's so important. It's a light load, but it's really, really important for you all in this audience and the people, as Roger suggested, 10 and 20 years following, and even after that. So other things that I really have engaged in heavily is the cost of health care, and most recently the cost of health insurance for people who buy their own, which is the minority of this audience, I'm sure, but still a huge deal. If you like reading, I wrote an editorial in the Star Tribune yesterday about this. It's critical for these families who are buying their own insurance. They maybe have their own store, or they work for somebody who doesn't offer insurance. It's a huge deal that's going to be crushed on. And it's really on my mind. Education is everything, you know. And everybody in this room is a product and is benefited by the great education Minnesota has and still needs to have, either by your own training or by the training of the people who serve you in so many different ways. In transportation, we talked about that. I work on that a bunch, and it's like endless. It's a problem that defies resolution, but it advances every day. And then, you know, clean air, clean water, the pristine state that Minnesota could be again. And many of you, as you've left your own legacies, want to leave the world a little better than you found it, and so do I. So thank you so much for being part of this, for your attention, and we are blessed to be in this amazing state.
Well, before it escapes me, I want to thank Mayor Keith for hosting all of us at this event. This is a pleasurable event. I have been in this building before, a number of times. And the reason is that my dear mother, who passed away 11 years ago, actually ended her life living in this facility, Mary Keith. I had a chance to choose to put her in a lot of different places, but chose this place because it contains within it the answers to all the complaints that I had last time I was talking. You know, it's clean, it's healthy, it's nice, it's all the way around. So thank you, Mary T, for everything. Thank Mary for Chesco for everything she does in our community. A lot of the issues we're talking about here are sort of statewide issues. And so the district we want to represent, the districts we want to represent, are in Anoka County. And we're aware that there are a lot of roads that come into Anoka County and go through Anoka County. And we know that there are other groups of individuals that have talked to all of us who want to do something with Highway 10 and Highway 65 and Highway 252 and Highway 47 and all the roads that go through Anoka County. I was surprised to find out that, because I asked somebody, has this delegation, wouldn't it be nice if all of us could be elected? Wouldn't it be nice if all of us could meet during the months of November and December after the election, say, what are we going to do as a delegation to begin to tackle the problem of transportation in our county? I know the senior citizens want senior mobility. Check to make sure that the seniors in the county have transit to and from their places that they live. We want to make sure we have the right light rail and the right other transportation issues so we can get our goods and services into and across our county with less trouble. So transportation issues would be an important priority. A second one would be higher education, simply because I suppose I spend a lot of time there, but I also see it as an economic engine for the state of Minnesota. We have to continue to find ways to keep Minnesota strong in the area of manufacturing. We've lost a lot of it, something like 40,000 jobs or 60,000 jobs in the last 10 years. We need to bring that back somehow. And so we need to use higher education as a way of incubating new businesses and startups, new companies that people can go to work for with good wages. And of course, then those people can pay taxes, and we can take those taxes and turn around and do what Brad wants to do, put them in a place that we advocate here in healthcare for disabled. And finally, job creation is important to me. There's nothing more important than for a human being to have the dignity that comes with having a job which can pay them enough money on their paycheck so they can go home, they can cash that paycheck, and have enough money left over so that they have money at the end of the month rather than run out of it in the middle of the month. I've been in that situation. I know what that's like. I've come from a poor family. That's why I'm a Democrat, I guess. I want things to develop in our society in such a way that our people have things a lot better than I ever had.
Thank you. So real briefly, I also just want to say thank you so much to Mary T. and for our hosts tonight and for all of you for being here. It's been a pleasure chatting, and as mentioned, please feel free to come up and ask questions so you can continue the conversation. So when I ran 2 years ago, in my heart, I just felt it was time to give back to the community that had given me so much. I graduated from Anoka High School, went to the University of Minnesota. I just love this state, love this community. And so the question about what other issues am I really passionate about is difficult to pare down to just to one or two, but in my responses that I've given to newspapers and things when they ask, I quote William Wilberforce a lot, and he worked very hard to end the slave trade in England. And as a legislator, he said he had two great tasks. It was ending the slave trade and reforming society. And I think that we still face a lot of the same things they faced back then. We still have really big issues with reforming society that we need to be tackling. We're talking about some here tonight. Transportation was mentioned. I serve on the Higher Education Committee. We need to reform the way higher education works. There's so many people my age that are in debt up to their eyes, and how are they going to buy a home and buy a car and all those other things that go along with just entering society. So those are some of the issues briefly that I'm passionate about that I'll continue working on. And other than that, God bless you all. Thank you for being here, and thanks again to your team.
And Mr. Hilbert.
And I want to thank Mary T. for hosting this, and for putting it together. And I want to thank all you guys for being here, and everybody up here who's been doing all the talking. I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their campaigning, just like I have, to be here. We were supposed to talk about some of the other things that are important to us. So I think everybody's covered pretty much or around the same areas. Mine are obviously, or not obviously, but our education, infrastructure, and taxes, and the environment. So, and I think a lot of them are quite well intertwined: education, infrastructure, taxes. They all kind of interlink themselves. Without taxes, we can't pay for education or infrastructure. Without infrastructure, education doesn't make any sense. So what it really comes down to is we need to educate our people. We do have to have some kind of reforming on our higher education, because we can't afford to have people with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt when they graduate and then they can find a $9 an hour job. With that education, it's not affordable, it's not a good place to leave people like Abigail, myself, or anybody else here. And it doesn't leave a lot of money left over for us to pay for other services like human services, or lots of words for disability services and elderly services. So education is important, infrastructure, we need to have our roads and bridges and walk paths and all the other things, parks and that kind of stuff, for us to get around, so that we can have the way, we need the infrastructure so we have the ways to get seniors and to their places for working or whatnot. And then taxes, obviously, that's how we pay for everything, and that's what I have, that's where my industry is, and I'm in, so I have a passion for that.
Thank you. Well, and I want to thank all of our candidates again for this really wonderful conversation we've had tonight. I really appreciate you taking your time out to come and talk to us about these important issues. Like I said, please, for our audience, take some time and talk to your individual candidates after we wrap up here and ask any follow-up questions or any questions that you might have that didn't get addressed during our conversation. And I also want to tell our advocates and remind them that some of these folks are going to be elected and will be your elected officials, and they need to hear from you come January, all through the session. So lots of the co-hosting organizations tonight have opportunities to get involved at the Capitol. So just reminder that MNCCD is at the Capitol every Tuesday and is there to help you find your legislators, walk you to wherever their offices are. They're there to be a resource. So if you want to be involved, MNCCD is at the Capitol every Tuesday. And then just a reminder that Arms Day at the Capitol is Tuesday, March 14th, and we hope to see you all there to advocate on behalf of all of these issues we've been talking about. So again, thank you to our candidates for taking the time out tonight. We really appreciate it.